Giving up is often a reaction, not a decision. This distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. A decision is calm. It is made from clarity, understanding, and responsibility. A reaction is immediate. It is born from emotion, pressure, and the desire to escape discomfort. Most people believe they are deciding to quit, when in truth, they are simply reacting to an internal storm they have never learned to sit with. When life becomes heavy, the mind looks for relief. It scans for exits. It whispers that stopping will bring peace, that walking away will restore balance. But this whisper is not wisdom. It is the voice of avoidance. In Shaolin understanding, the mind under stress does not seek truth, it seeks comfort. And comfort often comes at the cost of growth. Observe yourself in moments when you feel like giving up. Rarely does this feeling arise when you are calm, rested, and grounded. It appears when you are tired, emotionally overwhelmed, or uncertain. This tells you something important. The urge to quit is not a conclusion, it is a symptom. It signals that something inside you is under pressure and has not been trained to remain stable. A reaction happens faster than awareness. The body tightens. The breath shortens. Thoughts become absolute. I can't do this. This isn't for me. There's no point. These thoughts feel convincing because they are loud. But loud does not mean true. In training, students learn that the loudest voice is often the weakest part of the mind because it panics when challenged. A decision, on the other hand, requires stillness. It requires space between stimulus and response. It asks you to see the full picture, not just the current pain. Very few people give themselves this space. They act while the emotions are still burning. Then they call it wisdom after the fact. But wisdom does not rush, wisdom observes. Giving up as a reaction is rooted in identification. You identify with the discomfort and believe it defines you. You feel tired, so you believe you are weak. You feel confused, so you believe you are incapable. You feel resistance, so you believe the path is wrong. In disciplined practice, you are taught to separate sensation from identity. Feeling pain does not mean you are failing. Feeling resistance does not mean you are on the wrong path. The mind is conditioned to avoid effort when effort offers no immediate reward. This is why giving up feels logical. It promises instant relief, but relief is temporary. The cost is long-term regret, loss of self-trust, and the quiet knowledge that you did not meet yourself fully in that moment. Each time you quit reactively, the mind learns that pressure equals escape. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. Shaolin training emphasizes staying with the moment, especially when it is uncomfortable. Not to force success, but to understand yourself. When you stay, you begin to see how the urge to quit rises, peaks, and falls. You see that it is not permanent. You see that it does not kill you. This realization alone weakens its power over you. Many people believe strength means never wanting to quit. This is an illusion. Wanting to quit is human. Strength is not the absence of that desire, but the ability to not immediately obey it. Discipline is the space you create between feeling and action. In that space, choice becomes possible. When you react, you give your power to the emotion of the moment. When you decide, you reclaim that power. But decision-making requires training. It requires breath control, emotional regulation, and self-observation. Without these, the mind will always confuse reaction for truth. Ask yourself honestly, how many things have you quit in moments of intensity, only to later realize you could have continued? How many paths were abandoned not because they were wrong, but because you were unprepared for the discomfort they demanded? This is not failure. This is untrained awareness. Giving up as a reaction keeps you trapped in the same lessons. Life does not remove challenges you avoid. It reshapes them and presents them again. Different faces, same test. Until you learn to pause instead of react, the cycle continues. The practice is simple, but not easy. When the urge to give up appears, do nothing immediately. Breathe. Observe the sensation in the body. Notice the thoughts without believing them. Let the wave pass. Only after the mind settles are you allowed to decide. Most of the time. Once calm returns, the desire to quit loses its grip. This is how you transform giving up from an unconscious habit into a conscious choice. This is how you stop reacting to life and start meeting it with presence. Pain is information, not a signal to quit. This understanding alone can change how you move through difficulty, challenge, and uncertainty. Most people experience pain and immediately search for an exit. They assume pain means something is wrong, something is broken, something must stop. But in disciplined practice, pain is treated as a message, not a command. It speaks, but it does not decide. Pain appears whenever you step beyond what is familiar. The body feels it during training. The mind feels it during growth. The ego feels it when control is challenged. None of this is accidental. Pain arises precisely at the point where transformation begins. If pain truly meant danger in every situation, progress would be impossible. Muscles would never grow. Skills would never deepen. Character would never be forged. The problem is not pain itself, but our relationship with it. From a young age, many are taught to avoid discomfort at all costs. Comfort becomes the goal, not clarity. So when pain appears, the mind panics. It labels the experience as failure and searches for relief. But relief is not always healing. Often it is simply avoidance. In disciplined training, pain is observed carefully. There is a difference between pain that injures and pain that instructs. One damages the body, the other strengthens it. Learning to distinguish between the two requires awareness, not fear. When fear leads, everything feels dangerous. When awareness leads, pain becomes precise. It tells you where you are tense, where you lack balance, where your structure is weak. Mental and emotional pain function the same way. Frustration shows where expectations are unrealistic. Anxiety reveals attachment to outcomes. Resistance exposes areas where ego demands control. These sensations are not signs to abandon the path. They are guides pointing toward what needs refinement. To quit at the first sign of discomfort is to ignore valuable instruction. Pain also exposes honesty. When things are easy, everyone feels capable. When pressure increases, the truth surfaces. Weak habits become visible. Lack of discipline becomes undeniable. This is uncomfortable, so the mind prefers to escape rather than observe. But observation is where growth begins. If you can stay present with pain without immediately reacting, you gain insight that no comfort ever provides. Many people quit not because the pain is unbearable, but because they interpret it incorrectly. They assume pain means they are not meant for this path. In reality, pain often means the opposite. It means you are exactly where you need to be. It means you have reached the edge of your current capacity. What happens next determines whether that edge expands or remains fixed. The body adapts to stress when stress is applied intelligently. The mind does the same. When you stay with discomfort in a controlled, conscious way, resilience develops. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once caused panic becomes familiar. Pain loses its authority over your decisions. Avoiding pain weakens you. Every time you retreat at the first sign of difficulty, you teach the mind that discomfort is dangerous. Over time, tolerance shrinks. Even small challenges feel heavy. Life begins to feel overwhelming not because it is, but because the capacity to endure has never been trained. Pain also teaches humility. It reminds you that mastery is earned, not assumed. It strips away arrogance and exposes gaps in understanding. This can feel uncomfortable to the ego, which wants progress without process. But there is no depth without pressure. There is no refinement without friction. When pain appears, the first practice is to breathe. Breath creates space. Space creates choice. Instead of asking, how do I stop this? Ask, what is this showing me? This shift transforms pain from an enemy into a teacher. You stop fighting the experience and start learning from it. Quitting at the first sign of pain keeps you shallow. Enduring pain consciously deepens you. This does not mean forcing yourself blindly or ignoring real injury. It means staying present long enough to understand what kind of pain you are experiencing and why it has arrived. Pain is temporary, but the lesson it carries can last a lifetime. When you listen instead of flee, you grow stronger, calmer, and more grounded. You stop being controlled by sensation and start responding with awareness. This is how pain loses its power over you and becomes a tool for transformation. The mind breaks before the body does. This is not an opinion. It is something you can observe directly if you pay attention. In moments of pressure, fatigue, or challenge, the body is often still capable, still functioning, still breathing steadily. It is the mind that collapses first. It panics, it complains, it searches for reasons to stop. Long before the body reaches its true limit, the mind declares defeat. The mind is designed to conserve energy. Its primary function is survival, not growth. When effort increases and comfort decreases, the mind interprets this as danger. It sends signals meant to protect you: doubt, fear, excuses, and discouraging thoughts. These signals feel urgent and convincing, but they are not measurements of reality. They are protective reactions, not accurate assessments of capacity. In disciplined training, this pattern becomes clear very quickly. Students often say they are exhausted, yet when asked to continue with awareness and proper breathing, the body responds. Strength remains. Balance holds. The heart continues to beat steadily. What was labeled as, "I can't," turns out to be, "I don't want to feel this anymore." The difference is important. The mind breaks because it is attached to comfort. The body adapts to stress through repetition and gradual overload. The mind, however, resists this process. It seeks familiarity. It wants guarantees. When those are absent, it creates stories to justify withdrawal. These stories sound reasonable because they are emotionally charged. Thoughts such as, "This is too much," "I'm not built for this," or "There's no point continuing," appear at the exact moment when growth is possible. If you obey them automatically, you never discover what lies beyond them. You never learn how much more you can endure. The mind remains untrained, and its breaking point stays low. The body communicates through sensation. The mind interprets those sensations. When interpretation is untrained, sensation becomes exaggerated. Discomfort turns into suffering. Fatigue turns into panic. A disciplined mind learns to separate sensation from meaning. Burning muscles are noted without drama. Heavy breath is observed without fear. This calm observation prevents the mind from collapsing under pressure. Most people have never reached their physical limits. They have only reached their mental limits. These limits were established early through avoidance. Each time discomfort was escaped, the mind learned that quitting brings relief. Over time, the threshold for what feels unbearable became smaller. The mind became fragile, not because life is harsh, but because it was never conditioned to endure. When the mind breaks, it demands immediate relief. It convinces you that stopping is necessary. It frames quitting as self-care, wisdom, or intuition. But true intuition is quiet. It does not panic. It does not rush. It does not need to convince. When the mind is breaking, the voice you hear is loud and desperate. Training teaches you to stay present when the mind wants to flee. You are not asked to ignore pain, but to observe it without adding meaning. As you do this, something surprising happens. The mind settles. The body finds rhythm. What felt impossible a moment ago becomes manageable. Not easy, but possible. This is how resilience is built. Not by avoiding pressure, but by meeting it consciously. Each time you stay instead of escape, the mind learns that discomfort is survivable. Each time you breathe through intensity, the breaking point shifts. The mind becomes stronger, quieter, more reliable. The greatest battles are not with the body, but with the thoughts that arise when effort is required. The body asks for guidance. The mind often offers resistance. When you learn to lead the mind instead of obey it, you unlock capacity you did not know you had. Understanding that the mind breaks before the body does gives you power. It reminds you not to trust every thought that appears under stress. It teaches you to pause, breathe, and test your limits instead of assuming them. Over time, the mind stops breaking so easily, and the body becomes a trusted ally rather than a misunderstood limitation. Stillness reveals the way forward. This may sound simple, yet it is one of the most difficult practices to embody. When faced with uncertainty, pressure, or pain, the instinct is to move, react, fix, or escape. Action feels productive. Movement feels like control. Stillness, however, feels dangerous to an untrained mind because it removes distraction and exposes what is actually happening within. In moments of chaos, the mind becomes noisy. Thoughts multiply. Emotions pull in different directions. Each thought demands attention and claims urgency. When you move from this state, your actions are shaped by confusion rather than clarity. You may act quickly, but you rarely act wisely. Stillness interrupts this pattern. It creates a pause where reaction cannot dominate. Stillness does not mean doing nothing. It means doing nothing unnecessary. It means allowing the body to settle and the breath to slow so the mind can see clearly. In disciplined practice, stillness is treated as an active state of awareness. You are present, alert, and observing without interference. When you remain still in discomfort, you begin to notice details that were hidden by urgency. You notice how emotions rise and fall. You notice which thoughts repeat and which dissolve on their own. You see that not every impulse requires obedience. This observation alone weakens the power of reactivity. Most people search for answers through movement. They talk, scroll, distract, or seek external validation. But answers are rarely found in noise. Noise amplifies confusion. Stillness reveals patterns. It shows you what truly matters and what is simply mental clutter. In training, stillness is often introduced at the most uncomfortable moments. When muscles shake, when breath is heavy, when the urge to stop is strong, stillness is required. This teaches a powerful lesson. The urge to escape is strongest just before understanding emerges. If you move too soon, you miss the lesson entirely. Stillness allows emotions to complete their cycle. When you react immediately, emotions remain unresolved and return later with greater force. When you stay still, emotions are felt fully and then pass. This builds emotional maturity. You stop being controlled by feelings and start understanding them. The way forward is often not hidden. It is simply drowned out by mental noise. Stillness lowers the volume. It allows intuition to surface. True intuition is not emotional. It is calm, grounded, and precise. It does not shout. It waits for silence. In moments of decision, stillness is essential. Acting while emotionally charged often leads to regret. Waiting until the mind settles allows decisions to align with values rather than impulses. This does not delay progress. It prevents misdirection. Stillness also builds strength. It teaches patience, restraint, and trust. You learn that you do not need to respond to everything immediately. You learn that clarity arrives when you stop forcing outcomes. Over time, this trust deepens. You begin to move less but achieve more. When the body is still, the breath becomes a guide. Breath anchors you in the present moment. It reminds you that you are safe enough to pause. From this grounded state, challenges appear less overwhelming. Problems become manageable. Fear loses its grip. Many people fear stillness because it reveals uncomfortable truths. It shows where you are attached, where you are avoiding responsibility, where you are out of alignment. But this honesty is necessary. Without it, movement becomes meaningless. Stillness is not weakness. It is mastery over impulse. It is the ability to remain composed when others rush. It is the foundation of disciplined action. From stillness, movement becomes intentional. From clarity, effort becomes effective. The way forward is not always found by pushing harder. Sometimes it is found by standing still long enough to see where you are and where you need to go. Endurance is a skill that can be trained. It is not a trait reserved for a chosen few, nor is it something you either have or lack permanently. Like strength, balance, or focus, endurance develops through repeated exposure, correct effort, and conscious awareness. Most people underestimate this because they believe their limits are fixed, defined by personality, talent, or past experiences. In reality, limits shift when they are approached with discipline rather than avoidance. Endurance begins in the mind before it manifests in the body. The body follows instruction. The mind decides whether instruction is given. When discomfort appears, the untrained mind interprets it as a threat and signals withdrawal. The trained mind recognizes discomfort as part of the process and stays engaged. This difference is not willpower. It is conditioning. Training endurance means learning to remain present when things become uncomfortable. This applies not only to physical effort, but to emotional pressure, mental fatigue, and uncertainty. Each time you stay instead of escaping, you strengthen the capacity to endure. Each time you leave too quickly, that capacity weakens. Many people wait for motivation before they continue. Endurance does not depend on motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Endurance remains. It is built through consistency, not intensity. Small, repeated efforts teach the nervous system that discomfort is survivable. Over time, what once triggered resistance becomes normal. In disciplined practice, endurance is developed gradually. The load increases slowly. The duration extends carefully. This allows adaptation without injury. The same principle applies to life challenges. Facing difficulty in manageable doses builds resilience. Avoiding it entirely leads to fragility. Breath plays a central role in endurance. When breath is controlled, the nervous system remains calm. When breath becomes shallow or erratic, panic follows. Training endurance includes training breath under stress. Steady breath anchors attention and prevents the mind from exaggerating discomfort. Endurance also requires humility. You must accept that growth takes time. Impatience undermines endurance by creating unrealistic expectations. When progress feels slow, the untrained mind becomes frustrated and quits. The trained mind understands that refinement is gradual and stays the course. There is a misconception that endurance means pushing until collapse. This is not training, it is punishment. True endurance respects limits while gently expanding them. It listens to the body without surrendering to discomfort. This balance prevents injury and builds sustainable strength. Endurance reveals character. When conditions are favorable, everyone appears capable. When conditions deteriorate, endurance determines who remains steady. This steadiness is not dramatic. It is quiet and consistent. It does not seek recognition. Training endurance also builds trust in yourself. Each time you endure consciously, you prove that you can face difficulty without breaking. This self-trust becomes a foundation for confidence. You stop fearing challenges because you know you can stay present through them. Avoidance erodes endurance. Comfort weakens it. Constant stimulation and distraction reduce the ability to remain with a single task or feeling. Training endurance often begins by reducing unnecessary distractions and learning to focus on one thing at a time. Endurance is transferable. The discipline developed in one area strengthens others. Physical endurance supports mental clarity. Emotional endurance supports decision-making. Mental endurance supports patience. This integration creates stability. Life will demand endurance whether you train it or not. Challenges are unavoidable. The difference lies in preparation. When endurance is trained, challenges become opportunities to apply skill rather than threats to be avoided. Endurance is not about suffering endlessly. It is about developing the capacity to remain engaged without losing balance. It allows you to move forward steadily rather than burning out quickly. Through training, endurance becomes part of who you are. You no longer ask whether you can continue. You simply adjust, breathe, and proceed, knowing that the ability to endure has been cultivated through practice. What you seek on the outside is built within. This is not a poetic idea meant to comfort you. It is a practical truth that reveals itself through observation and disciplined practice. Most people spend their lives chasing external conditions, believing that once something is obtained, peace will follow. Recognition, relationships, success, certainty, approval. Yet even when these are achieved, the satisfaction is short-lived. Something is always missing. This is because the external world can only reflect what has already been developed internally. The mind looks outward because it believes solutions exist beyond itself. When discomfort arises, it seeks distraction. When insecurity appears, it seeks validation. When fear emerges, it seeks protection. These strategies work temporarily, but they do not resolve the root. They create dependence on circumstances that are always changing. Internal qualities, however, are stable. Calmness does not come from a quiet environment. It comes from a quiet mind. Confidence does not come from praise. It comes from self-trust. Discipline does not come from strict rules. It comes from clarity of purpose. When these qualities are undeveloped, the mind searches externally, hoping something will compensate for what is lacking inside. In discipline training, this becomes clear very quickly. A student may believe that better conditions will improve performance, more space, better tools, easier routines. But when these are provided, the struggle remains. The real obstacle was never the environment. It was inner resistance, impatience, or lack of focus. Once this is understood, attention shifts inward. The external world is unpredictable. People change. Circumstances shift. Control is limited. Building your foundation on what you cannot control creates constant instability. Building within creates resilience. When stability is internal, external changes lose their power to disturb you. Seeking externally also weakens responsibility. When you believe answers are outside, you wait, you hope, you blame. Internal development requires ownership. It asks you to look honestly at your habits, reactions, and attachments. This is uncomfortable, but it is empowering. Peace is often mistaken for the absence of challenge. In reality, peace is the ability to remain centered during challenge. This cannot be given to you. It must be trained. The same is true for clarity. Clarity is not found by collecting information endlessly. It emerges when the mind is disciplined enough to focus. Relationships reveal this truth clearly. Many seek fulfillment through others, expecting them to provide meaning, stability, or happiness. But when inner emptiness exists, no relationship can fill it. The need becomes endless. When inner fullness is cultivated, relationships become a place of sharing rather than dependence. Strength is another example. External power can dominate others, but internal strength governs yourself. Without internal strength, external power leads to imbalance. With it, even difficult situations are met with composure. The path inward requires patience. There is no shortcut. You cannot borrow inner qualities from someone else. You cannot buy them. You must build them through daily practice. Observing your reactions, refining your discipline, strengthening your awareness. The mind resists this work because it offers no immediate reward. External pursuits provide quick feedback. Inner work is subtle. Progress is quiet, but its effects are profound. Over time, the need to chase diminishes. Satisfaction becomes less dependent on outcomes. When you build within, the external world becomes a training ground rather than a source of fulfillment. Success becomes something you engage with, not something you cling to. Failure becomes information, not identity. Everything you seek externally points back to an internal quality waiting to be developed. Security points to self-trust. Love points to self-respect. Freedom points to discipline. Meaning points to presence. Once this is understood, the direction of effort changes. You stop chasing reflections and start cultivating the source. And as the inner foundation strengthens, the external world begins to respond differently, not because it has changed, but because you have